So we'll talk a little bit about kind of what's going on in procure-to-pay. When I say procure-to-pay or P2P, I am not being specific to indirect materials. We're talking about direct materials as well. I know a lot of folks use the P2P term and think of it as indirects, but this is for all procurement automation. We'll talk a little bit about what's changing specifically within the process industries and how to start building a business case internally at your company to get to automation program. So, what do we see for the most part when I talk to customers with prospects, read information on the market from analysts? For the most part, I see supplier management with people that aren't connected through Illumika as being stuck, relying on these decades-old methods for management, very manual processes, PDFs, emails, faxes. But not a true connection, not true electronic information sharing. There's also this missing a shared vision across purchasing and finance. So typically only one group within the organization will be looking at the benefits and talking about the benefits, and there's not this kind of global view or cross-silo view of how we can use supplier management to meet objectives in both purchasing and in the finance team. The lack of an internal champion. A lot of companies started with some direct material supplier automation, built a handful of direct connects a few years ago, and then the project stalled. And more recently, the focus from the analyst community has very much been on direct connects, on indirects and requisitioning and getting control over that process. And direct materials has kind of been lost in that. Well, what's changing? So what are we seeing in the environment today? First, from an organizational perspective, we're seeing the rise of CSCOs, or Chief Supply Chain Officers. And it may not be the Chief Supply Chain Officer, it may be an extension of the role of the Chief Procurement Officer. But they're starting to kind of look across silos, across different groups within the organization, having these global service teams. And there's been this renewed focus in these organizations on the opportunities that exist upstream. There's so much working capital there, so much that visibility can help you achieve improvements in your supply chain. And looking at new technologies, we've been talking a lot about that today, social, new methods for connecting suppliers, new methods for communicating with your supply base, new methods for understanding risk associated to your supply base. So they're starting to look at these new technologies, and these are the ones I'm kind of talking about here. These business networks like Illumika that can build these connections quickly and scale them with robust connections where the data is really clean and it's validated and it's cross-referenced and it's in a format that makes sense for your partner. And these SaaS solutions where you can onboard suppliers very quickly to a web portal, but that they also provide these interfaces for doing risk management, what Continental was just talking about here as well, with these new technologies around risk and disruption. And also what you're seeing from your competition. The tire and rubber industries, for the most part, started supplier management programs over a decade ago, around 15 years ago, is when they started to really kind of focus on this and achieve these valuable working capital savings, these valuable productivity savings metrics. The process industries, specifically the chemical industry within the process industries, has been much slower to really kind of expand their supplier network strategy. But that's changed. If you were at our conference last year, you would have seen BSF, Ralph Carr from BSF, talk about their new vendor interaction portal, their new solution. They're onboarding 5,000 of their suppliers. So they're really going after their supplier network. They really understand the benefits of automation. They're really starting to build a big program. And if you're in our North American conference, which if you're able to attend that, you'll see Dow AgroScience also do a presentation where they're looking to onboard around 1,000 suppliers. So they're also starting to gain momentum there. And from a Illumika perspective, this is the fastest growing portion. Well, between this and logistics are the two fastest growing portions of our organization, where most of our sales pipeline exists. So between supplier management and logistics, there's a lot going on right now. And then we'll go through this in the interest of time pretty quickly, but what are the analysts saying? If you want to listen to them, if you read them, you'll see that the CPO's agenda, they're talking about supplier collaboration is no longer optional, that supplier networks are utilized by more best-in-class companies. Hackett Group shows the same thing in their P2P study. And Chief Supply Chain Officer report talks about supplier networks and supplier relationships being the second most important value contributor to the supply chain, only after customer relationships. And the B2B collaboration actually has supplier value being created, supplier network value being created ahead of customer networks. So what does this look? This is a very simple 2D representation of kind of supplier automation maturity within an organization. And we see companies going from kind of faxes and emails to EDI, maybe having an internal portal on SAP, and eventually getting to something like an Olimica solution of business network, and eventually getting to what I call kind of a network nervous system, which is really incorporating the risk management signals, the predictive signals, and the prescriptive signals as well. So initially companies were focused on let's move this data faster. So they got better ways of doing it. Instead of mail, you had phone calls, you had faxes and emails, and EDI. Then you got to business networks with Olimica. This is about moving cleaner data faster so that the data that's getting into your system is valuable. That you're not just creating additional overhead on your side to try and clean up that data. Because if you're pushing dirty data through the system, it's not going to make it any better. So you need it to be validated. You need it to be cross-referenced. You need it to go through business rules. And also linking cross-partner process data. So this is another thing that we saw with the previous presentation today. We're doing things where we're tying procurement signals over to logistics. So we'll use an order response in our procurement solution to go feed the slot booking solution, so that then your supplier or the carrier for that can go look at the inbound delivery calendar for that particular plant and see the different time frames that are open, and thus schedule and hopefully avoid your transportation fees, additional transportation fees from detention or demurrage. And also scaling quickly. And then finally getting to the network nervous system. This is where I view Olimica as opening new communication channels that we haven't really thought of today. This is applying new data feeds. When we talk about new communication channels, when a company like BSF, for example, onboards 5,000 suppliers onto our SaaS solution, they're going to have access to those users. So we've always talked about building a network of companies, but there's tremendous value in my mind of connecting the actual people that are interacting and providing a common platform like Olimica to be kind of your Facebook for extending that to your supply chain. You all probably have some sort of messaging service internally at your company that you use, and internally at Olimica we use Skype. But being able to have a platform where your 5,000 suppliers are logging in every day and looking at data, that they can actually interact with your plants, they can interact with your purchasers, that they have that channel of communication available to them, that they can provide alerts before even the system does. So our system might say, hey, this shipment was supposed to leave today and we haven't got a shipment signal. So maybe this is an issue. But now we have a pipeline where the supplier can tell you the day before, send a message through this, or let you know that there's an issue related to a shipment that we can associate to that. So that you know the day before we even generate an alert, because we're having the suppliers kind of interact with that data and with the people every day. And then applying new data feeds on top of that. That's where we look at some of the other big data applications, so that you can start pulling in weather information, port information, geopolitical information, and tying it to your supply chain. And what the real value of that is, because big data is, kind of this ubiquitous term lately, but the real value from an Olimica perspective with the big data concept is that we can take that and we can apply it to specific purchase orders, specific shipments, and let you know exactly what your supply is at risk, what purchase orders are at risk. So Michael talks about the port explosion in Tianjin. Through the way that we envision things is that port explosion will then trigger a signal that gets sent to the Olimica system that we can tie specifically to your shipments that we know come through that port. And we can tell you right away, there's not only an issue here, but this is what it affects. So this is kind of how we envision the Illumika ecosystem on the supplier management side, that you have your supply base connected sending signals. You have your 3PL base and your carrier base sending signals as well, sending ocean container status signals for your inbound supply. And then we have a pipeline of big data, and all wrapped around this kind of community social features where users are able to kind of interact with each other on a daily basis and see all these alerts and all this information on their wall, where companies can publish, data out to their suppliers, where companies can request from all of their suppliers, we need all of you to input your ISO certification on this, or we need all of you to input your data on conflict minerals and send us your certification on that. And you can push all of that out to that network and have all these users kind of that interact with the system, just put it up into our system so that you have one place to kind of manage your suppliers from every aspect. So how do you get there? And we'll move through this kind of quickly. Agent of change. So first you have to identify someone within your company with executive approval that's willing to challenge the status quo, that's not afraid of change, not afraid of change management, that's going to take an objective look at the metrics and put a real business case together for delivering a supplier management program. And you're going to have to give them the resources. You're going to have to build a team. They're going to need people from finance. They're going to need people from purchasing. And honestly, it would be wise at this point to also involve plants. Because ultimately, once you've actually gotten to the point of delivering a supplier management solution, the earlier you can involve all the stakeholders, the better. Because these are the guys that are going to be able to speak the language to all of these other groups, or all these other people within those groups, and kind of tell them this is the business case, this is why we're doing it. This is why it makes sense for us as a procurement organization or as a finance organization. So you want to involve the stakeholders early, because that'll help your change management effort internally. So how do you go about then building a business case? So let's look in this. I'm gonna use these kind of parameters: purchasing metrics, FTEs per PO line, FTEs per shipment process, percentage of orders requiring some sort of intervention or rush transportation, what the cost is of those rush shipments, how it could impact your inventory turnover. And for invoicing, we'll look at similar productivity metrics for FTEs per invoice, but also invoices requiring intervention, days payables outstanding, on-time payments, and discounts captured. And of course, this will be made available to everyone afterwards. And also, if you have any questions, you have my business cards here. Please take one and leave your own if you don't mind. So here's the business case. So for my, Omar Natty Chem, my company, and for simplicity's sake, we're going to assume spend is the same as cost of goods sold for this model. But this company has $5 billion in spend, 150,000 PO lines, average inventory of about 833 million, putting them at an inventory turnover of 6. We pay about 80% of our invoices on time. We have 30 people working on order confirmations and shipments, and 50 people working on invoices and statuses. And these aren't necessarily full-time resources, but it might be 100 people working part-time on that, or 200 people working part-time on that, but it's full-time equivalents. This is the number of man-years that we have touching these processes. And we pay these folks around $40 an hour, and the cost of capital, and assume it's around 5%. So then I'm going to plug that into my purchasing value calculator. So this is just from the purchasing side. So we start with labor savings. So how much time do you save in processing order responses, ASNs, dealing with data quality issues? Did you get a shipment with the right product, the right time, perfect order kind of thing? And I'll tell you, in our North American conference next month, when Dow AgriScience comes to talk about their supplier management program, they're going to show you numbers that are very much aligned with this. In fact, in their order response processing, they have a 6-minute savings. And if you look at that with this company, with the rate and the number of people, 5 minutes, every minute you save processing one of these orders is $100,000. And that's basically an employee. Every time you save 1 minute. So Dow Agro is actually 1 minute ahead of us, or 1 minute better here. Their ASN processing, they just started to roll that out, so we'll see if they have a new number on that, but they have an input one here. But you can see kind of the labor savings, the productivity savings, what I like to call human capital savings. And then operational improvements around expedited or delayed orders. And I just applied a 1% factor there. 1% of the orders require some sort of expedition. And I put the cost around $3,000, but of course that can vary tremendously. For example, if it's ocean freight, you know, a shipment's going to go from costing you maybe $3,000 to $80,000 to get a 20,000 kilogram container if you've got to air freight it in an emergency shipment. So like one ocean freight shipment that becomes an air freight shipment is a tremendous cost to an organization. And then I gave us an improvement of 0.25 inventory turns. And both of these bottom two here, operational and working capital improvements, are also both multiplied by the cost of capital. So I haven't just taken out the total amount. I've actually, because when you go to your finance team and you're trying to tell them how you built this business case, you can't just say this is, I've saved $20 million. They're going to say, well, it's $20 million. What is the opportunity cost of that $20 million? We're going to look at the cost of that capital and what else we could be doing with it. So I have a cost of capital savings applied at 5% there. And that breaks out, and this is just order through the shipment process to a total annual savings, in this case, of about $3.7 million or $25 per PO. And then we go to the finance side of it. So the same case is here, invoice processing, I have 15 minutes. And that's exactly what Gallagher will present as well. So that's they're my calculator. And this is just a coincidence. Well, it's because the data I'm using is based on reality as well, but it just is, it happens to be validated by someone that will be speaking at our conference next month. So they've already achieved 15 minutes per invoice. And then if you look at invoice discount, so I have here that you have 15% of your invoices are available for discount that you're not capturing. And you just improve that, you get 30% improvement on that 15%, and you get a small savings there, about $250,000 almost. You improve your days payable outstanding on the 80% of invoices that you're paying on time by 1 day, and you get $500,000. This is also, again, multiplied by the cost of capital. And if you improve the 20% of your invoices you're paying late, assuming you're getting a late payment discount. So let's say you improve the 20% you're paying late by 50%, so you reduce that 20 to 10, and you get another $500,000. And you may not have, especially if you're in the direct material world, maybe the suppliers don't charge you a late payment. But if you have a credit issue with that supplier, you can be sure that those charges are going into the price of that product. They're taking that into account when they're negotiating with you. So being able to make those payments on time, even if you don't have a late payment charge, still improves your negotiation position with those suppliers and still can result in capital savings. So what does that result in here? A little over $4 million, $27 per invoice. So to summarize that, in this case that I built here, we had about $7.9 million in savings. And that's very consistent with analyst studies as well. So here, this B2B integration study from Aberdeen around building an ROI business case. They actually saved a little bit more than what I did in my analysis. Here they had best-in-class automated versus all others in manual, about $32 for the order through ASN process and about $30 for the invoice and payment process. You've improved your efficiency KPIs, you've reduced your rush shipments, improved your inventory turnover, reduced your days payables, improved your on-time payment, and that gives you the working of the $7.9 million. The working capital savings are about 3.2 or $13 per PO or $8.50 per invoice. And your human capital, or your productivity savings, are about 4.7 million, and that's a little more difficult to apply because you're not just going to fire 59 people here with the 23 years of manpower that you saved for purchasing and 36 years of manpower for finance. What you're going to do is some of these people maybe are going to work on your supplier management initiative. You're going to have a handful of these people working on that initiative. Keeping that program running. You're going to have people maybe working on new business process initiatives. You maybe create a center for excellence within your organization and you have resources now that can start to work on these other projects. When you as a company have a new project that before you say, well, we just don't have people to do that, now you have people to do that. When you grow as a company, you don't need to hire more people because you freed up all these people's time. And so you're moving from a scenario where you're doing 5,000 orders per FTE and 3,000 invoices to 18,000 orders per FTE and 9,000 invoices because your system is automated. And these are just the kind of more tangible benefits, things that you can apply a number to. There's a lot of stuff like what Michael was talking about, just the having that quality data in your system allows you to do much more as a business, allows you to be much more agile as a business because you have an understanding of exactly what's going on in your supply chain. So there's these other benefits. Your efficiency gains upstream, unlock benefits downstream. So the better data you have coming into your system, the better you know what your available to promise is. The better you're able to service your customers. The better service levels you have as a buyer. While reducing your inventory levels. That data helps you calculate your total landed cost, your total cost of ownership, so that you as a sourcing organization can make better decisions understanding exactly what the cost is. We have a company that works with us where it's only through the shipment and the freight information that goes through our system that they're able to tie it back to a PO. Their general process in their organization is they get a freight invoice. Half the time they can apply it to a PO, half the time they can't, and it just gets approved. And they really don't have very good visibility of what's happening with that. You get better metrics around understanding what suppliers are performing well in the supply chain and what suppliers aren't. You improve your relationships with your suppliers. You have more on-time payments. It's going to give you better negotiation positions. It's going to make your suppliers happy. Improve communication, less work for everyone. You're standardizing these processes around automation, getting rid of these old, antiquated kind of ways of doing things. Eliminating paper, becoming greener. And freeing up IT resources, especially if you're a company that tries to maintain your own internal portal or several point-to-point connections with a bunch of suppliers. IT is not your core competency, and you don't want it to be. And you can free up these IT resources to work on other projects, more value-added projects for your company. And this is just kind of the base, the automation kind of platform just starts. Then you can tie on logistics to this, then you can tie on the big data parts of this, but it starts with just the automation, just building that supplier network, getting the data into your system. And finally, I'll leave you with a word of caution. You have to be careful about what company you work with, what partner you work with. This is a model based on a network transaction fee where they take a fee straight out of a percentage of the value going through the system, a percentage of the transaction, of your transaction. So in this model, I plugged in these numbers for my chemical company. And you can see that the total cost to the system, we were saving $7.9 million if you'll recall, but the total cost to the system in this case is $8 million. So even though to the buyer you're maybe being charged a $400,000 fee, your suppliers are being charged $7.6 million, and that's ultimately going to get charged back to you. I mean, what we've seen with the stories that I've heard from other customers about how basically every invoice has a line item in there for that network transaction fee, letting them know we're just charging this right back to you. So you have to be careful if you know who you work with. You have to understand what the total cost to the system is. Are we really getting a net gain out of all this effort we're putting into this program? All right, and with that, any questions? I have my cards here. If you like to talk, if you'd like to run your numbers through any of our value calculators or get additional input in that regard, please let me know. And if you have a contact with Olympica, one of our account managers, they can also help you out with that. All right, seeing no questions, I'm always available. I'll be here. I guess we can all go grab a cocktail then.
All right. Thanks.